Welcome to the debate. Today we are diving into, well, the strategic crossroads facing the Los Angeles Lakers about a third of the way through this 2025-26 NBA season. On the surface, things look pretty good. The team's playing at a pace that projects to a very healthy 57 wins, and it's all being fueled by a top-tier 7th-ranked offense. But beneath that shiny record lies a pretty profound and, I would argue, a potentially catastrophic structural imbalance.
And that imbalance is exactly why we're talking about this. The front office finds itself really backed into a corner. We're discussing a team with a defensive rating of 117.8. I mean, those metrics put them statistically as the worst defense among all teams currently holding a guaranteed playoff spot. They're sitting 23rd in points allowed per 100 possessions, so the response, according to the reports we're seeing, is to target the Sacramento Kings guard Keon Ellis.
And that brings us right to our central question today. Does this reported intent to acquire Ellis, a very targeted, defensive-minded role player, does that represent a defining, necessary maneuver that could actually resolve these deep defensive flaws and stabilize their championship window? Or, as you're suggesting, is this just an overhyped, inadequate solution trying to slap a bandage on a much deeper, systemic, organizational imbalance?
I'm arguing the latter. I really am. The scale of this defensive crisis is so severe that, frankly, relying on a single non-star role player to fix it feels like a massive oversight.
And I'm going to hold that this targeted move is absolutely crucial. It's the precise, almost surgical solution they need right now to maximize what is, a shrinking championship window. The defense is flawed, yes, absolutely, but Ellis provides that necessary stopgap which lets them use their greatest asset, that 7th-ranked offense, to its full potential. I think standing still is the far greater risk here.
The problem is that the data really suggests this team is succeeding despite its fundamental flaws, not because their current model is sustainable. I mean, they're sitting at a very middling 14th in net rating, which is statistically just unsustainable for a team that's projecting 57 wins. You simply cannot maintain a top-tier record with a bottom-tier defense. It catches up to you. And this systemic failure can't be cured by just slotting in one role player, especially one whose own offensive production, his scoring average, has dipped pretty significantly this season, going from 8.3 points per game down to 5.1. That kind of dip matters in the playoffs.
My position is really supported by the specific, and I would say rare, profile that Ellis brings. He's a true plug-and-play kind of asset. He provides elite, immediate perimeter defense, which is the precise pressure point that's collapsing their current scheme. And crucially, he also offsets any offensive pressure by being a highly efficient three-point shooter. He's maintained better than 40% efficiency from deep over the past 2 seasons. That efficiency is absolutely key.
That's an interesting point, though I think I would frame it differently. While that skill set is desirable, sure, the acquisition cost is alarming when you consider the marginal impact you can expect. The front office is reportedly willing to sacrifice a protected first-round pick. We're talking potentially from 2026, 2028, or 2030 for this marginal boost. We're talking about sacrificing future flexibility for years for a player whose main appeal is his cheap contract. The severity of the defensive crisis, I think, demands a wholesale shift, not just a positional patch.
I see why you think that cost is prohibitive, but let's actually talk about the scale of the defensive problem versus the scope of this proposed solution. You cite the 117.8 defensive rating as proof that the failure goes beyond just one position. And look, I agree, those numbers are symptomatic of a deep failure, but we have to identify the catalyst. In the modern NBA, instability starts on the perimeter. Poor closeouts, constant blow-bys, failed rotations on the outside that forces the interior defenders, and we're talking specifically about Anthony Davis, into impossible situations. It just leads to defensive confusion and hemorrhaging points.
That's true in theory, but the mechanics of the failure suggest the issues are deeper than just defending the primary ball handler. I mean, a rank of 23rd in points allowed means they are struggling with weak side rotations and interior verticality, even with Davis on the floor. So the crisis isn't just about stopping penetration, it's about recovery speed and help side execution. Can Ellis, despite his reputation as a stopper, realistically stabilize a defense that is this broken? We're asking him to solve systemic flaws in communication and team scheme with a $2.3 million contract and a pair of good hands. It just feels insufficient.
But even a modest improvement on the perimeter acts as that crucial anchor that they're missing. If Ellis can just stabilize that initial weak point, stopping the primary drive, forcing the opponent into a second action late in the clock, it reduces all that frantic scrambling that defines their current defense. When those perimeter leaks stop, Anthony Davis can go back to being a pure rim protector, rather than being forced to cover 3 positions at once. This tactical shift is the force multiplier I'm talking about.
I'm just not fully convinced by that line of reasoning because you're focusing entirely on the defensive benefit, while I think minimizing the offensive constraints. Ellis's scoring volume is noticeably down this year. Yes, he shoots 40% from 3, that's great. But if he's just a stationary shooter who doesn't create his own shot or apply any pressure, defenses will gladly just leave him alone to focus on the stars. When the game slows down in the playoffs, you need secondary creators, not just spot-up specialists, especially when you're giving up a first-round pick.
The $2.3 million salary is the counter-argument to that offensive concern, though. It's financially brilliant. This is a team managing money around aging stars and, severe luxury-attached concerns. By acquiring Ellis on such a friendly deal, they're addressing a critical weakness without dipping into their mid-level exception or sending themselves into that harsher salary apron, which would severely restrict any future roster moves.
Right, and that's a compelling argument about financial prudence, but let's really examine the value proposition of that protected pick. You're suggesting that paying premium draft capital for affordability is sound strategy, but executives across the league, they know the Lakers are desperate for perimeter defense. And that's what's driving Ellis's value up to a protected first-rounder. A protected pick means they're mortgaging flexibility across 3 separate drafts, 2026, 2028, and 2030. If those picks don't convey right away, the Lakers are stuck with this debt on their future flexibility for years, all for a player who, in your own words, only offers a modest improvement.
But that's only a liability if you assume the current roster fails to win a title in the next 2 years. The value of that pick drops drastically when you weigh it against the value of a championship now. This deal accelerates their timeline immediately. It fixes a present defect that directly threatens their current standing. Standing still, given LeBron James's timeline, is the highest risk move they could possibly make. This trade signals a real commitment to winning right now, prioritizing the present over some hypothetical future value.
I guess I come at it from a different way. That urgency, while I get it, it feels like it's leading the front office to make an emotional reaction to external pressure. The embarrassment of having the worst defensive rating among playoff teams, rather than a solution that's actually tailored to repair the schematic damage. Let's pivot to the coaching impact for a second. JJ Redick's system, it relies heavily on effort and intensity, particularly on the perimeter. If the existing guys can't execute that scheme to even a competent level, why is adding just one player the answer, instead of maybe moving larger contracts from multiple high-floor defensive players?
But that's the genius of the Ellis deal. It immediately helps define the new coaching identity. It introduces a benchmark for defensive effort on the perimeter, which is something the current lineup just lacks entirely. Imagine Ellis locking down opposing guards. That sets a new expectation for every single rotation player. And furthermore, this move is essential for the longevity of the stars. It reduces LeBron James's defensive load dramatically, allowing him to conserve energy solely for offensive creation where, he remains completely elite.
I would argue the opposite. This move simplifies the crisis way too much. The net rating of 14th fundamentally proves that this team is winning because of sheer offensive talent, not because of structural soundness. If they bring in Ellis and the defensive rating only moves from 117.8 to, say, 115, they are still a vulnerable team that cannot survive the top-tier offenses of the Western Conference in a 7-game series. The return on investment for a first-round pick has to be a transformative change, not just a fractional statistical adjustment.
See, I disagree on the definition of transformative. A 2-point drop in defensive rating from 117.8 to 115 would be massive for a team with the 7th-ranked offense. That shift moves them out of the basement of playoff defense and into the realm of respectability. It converts those close, high-scoring losses into wins. It directly addresses the defensive vulnerability that is erasing the offense's effectiveness. Ellis is the missing link that ties their offensive firepower to actual consistent winning.
And that's where I take exception. We have to look at the specific role players who are currently struggling. They need better closeouts from multiple positions, not just one. If Ellis covers the point of attack, but the small forwards or the weak side defenders continue to lose their men off the ball, well, the system remains compromised. We are overvaluing the benefit of one individual without addressing the collective failure. The complexity of a 23rd ranked defense, it requires multiple perspectives to fully appreciate it. Focusing solely on Ellis just makes him a scapegoat if the underlying systemic issues persist.
But the luxury of the $2.3 million contract is that it allows the Lakers to still pursue further marginal improvements with their remaining assets. This isn't necessarily the final move, but it's the necessary first move. It stabilizes the most urgent leak, the inability to contain perimeter penetration, without sacrificing any of their larger movable contracts, which they will need for a bigger trade down the line if necessary.